Welcome to the 9th episode of the second season of The Pulpiteer. I'm your host, Eric Hepburn, and I'm glad to have you join us for today's episode. Today's episode has two parts: selections from our water communion ceremony and a short message about building belonging. This week, the reading will be delivered by our lay leader, Woody Hibbard, and Candace White, our Director of Religious Exploration, will share the history of water communion. Let's get started. We make things holy by the kind of attention we give them. We make things holy by the kind of attention we give them. Today in our water communion ceremony, we're going to try and honor the spirit of that. The water communion has been around in Unitarian Universalism since the 1980s. And it has been a religious tradition in this community since its founding in 2007. This is my first water communion with you all, and I've taken the liberty of changing a few things that I hope will deepen both the meaning and the experience of the ceremony. For those new to the ceremony, a brief outline. Congregants collect water in special moments or from special locations, and once a year we bring that water together in the water communion ceremony, and we share it with the community. If you didn't know or didn't think to collect water, or if you did but it's safe at home, you may use the pitcher of community water here on the table to represent your water. Let me reiterate, there's a community pitcher here. Everyone is invited to celebrate, not just those who knew in advance to bring water. For me, this ceremony at its heart is a blessing ceremony. And so we're going to treat it as such. So the first thing I'm going to invite you to do is to take a moment to think of the water that you hold in your hands or that you hold in your heart. Picturing the time or place from where you collected that water, and ask this question: what blessing did you receive from that water, from that place, from that time? And what blessing does that inspire you to pass on to this community? And there's a script. Good ritual has a litany. And the litany that we're going to follow today is, I add to this water my water, with blessings of peace and clarity, for example. Okay. Now, we are speaking the blessing into the water, into this bowl in front of us. The microphone is there so that if you wish to say your blessing aloud, others can listen in. But I want you to make the water holy with the kind of attention that you give it. I want you to speak your blessing to this community into the water. If you'd like to do that silently, you can. I add to this water my water, with blessings of peace and clarity. This is the water from all of our previous water communions. Congregation, please repeat after me. We add to this water the water of all those who have come before. We offer the combined blessings of 18 water communion ceremonies. We are the ones our ancestors dreamed of. The final step of this ceremony will be done as our benediction at the end of the service. Thank you all for your attention, your kindness, your wishes, your blessings. And now Candace is going to share with us the story of the first water communion ceremony.
This story lifts up two inspiring UU ancestors, Lucille Shuck Longview and Carolyn McDade, and the history of how and why the ritual of water communion came to be. It reminds us that our belonging is a gift to those who came before us and courageously stood up for wider circles. A long time ago, in the 1970s, there was a kind and curious woman named Lucille Shuck Longview. She was a Unitarian Universalist and loved her UU church in Lexington, Massachusetts. In 1975, Lucille got to travel to Mexico City as a UU delegate to be part of the United Nations Women's Year Assembly. This was a huge meeting where people talked about women's rights and how to make the world more fair. When she came home, Lucille had learned something important. Even in churches, even in her own beloved Unitarian Universalist faith, women's voices weren't always listened to. And that wasn't fair. So Lucille spoke up. She asked other UUs, what if we looked closely at our faith and made sure it truly respected women too? Lots of people agreed. They worked together to create something called the Women and Religion Resolution. It said, let's take a deep look at the words and ideas we use in church and make sure everyone is included, especially women and girls. The resolution was passed by the 1977 General Assembly. And for the next few years, people worked to change our faith tradition's language to be more inclusive of women and to lift up and address the care of Mother Earth as a religious priority. In 1980, as part of this work, Lucille and her friend Carolyn McDade planned a very special gathering just for UU women. They called it Coming Home Like Rivers to the Sea. At that gathering, the women held a beautiful worship service that spoke to our connectedness to one another and to the totality of life and to our place on this planet. They included a new inclusive symbol of women's spirituality, water, and in doing so, they made a brand new ritual, the water communion. Each woman brought a little bit of water from somewhere special, maybe from a river near her home or a place she had traveled, or even her kitchen sink. One by one, the women stood in a circle and poured their water into a big bowl. As they poured, they shared the stories of where their water came from and why it mattered to them. The woman said that water was a powerful symbol. It could come from many different places just like they did. But when they poured their water together, it became one. Just like them, many voices, but one strong community. Some of the women even poured out their perfume bottles to carry the special water home because they wanted to keep that feeling of strength and togetherness close to them. The first water communion helped inspire big changes in the UU faith, like updating our UU principles to use more welcoming language and to remind us to care for the earth. And today, UU congregations all over the world celebrate water communion as a way to feel connected to each other, to our faith, and to the earth.
And now I invite you to a place of deeper stillness. And after the reading, as Eric said, we will have a period for quiet meditation, contemplation, or prayer. This morning's reading comes from Michael Benedict. Treat stones like plants. Treat plants like animals. Treat animals like humans. Treat strangers like friends. Treat friends like family. Treat family like your own self, and yourself as a sputtering flame of the divine, a bringer of greater life.
We gather today on this first Sunday in September. According to the tradition of this church, that first Sunday is on the same subject as our Connections group. It's a curriculum produced by an organization called Soul Matters, and today we're focusing on building belonging. We had a water communion ceremony that led us into a space of sharing blessings with one another. We did our practice of joys and concerns, and we held space for one another. We make things holy by the kind of attention we give them. We make things holy by the kind of attention we give them. I worked with Michael Benedict, the author of today's shared reading, for almost 20 years at the University of Texas. He died about a month ago, and I got an email earlier this week sharing some things about Michael's life, and this quote from one of his books was in that. And it felt appropriate this morning. Treat stones like plants. Treat plants like animals. Treat animals like humans. Treat strangers like friends. Treat friends like family. Treat family like your own self and yourself as a sputtering flame of the divine, a bringer of greater life. We make things holy by the kind of attention we give them. As we enter into this new season of small group ministry, I'm called to depart from what y'all are gonna read about, which you know I will like. I see a few people grinning at me who have pre-read, and they thought for sure I was going to talk about loneliness this morning, because that's what's in your packet. Loneliness as an introduction into belonging, which, as you know, for me, I find fascinating. I'm always about finding the light in the travel through the shadow. But you're going to get to do that adventure with one another in small group. We're not going to do it this morning. This morning, we're going to talk about the positive way in which we hold space for one another in deep listening. We didn't make this water holy. We spoke our blessings into it, and it mattered, and something was catalyzed, something that matters deeply to all of us. Our wishes and dreams and aspirations and hopes mixed in with those of our neighbors and those of our loved ones and those of our comrades. All those dreams mixed together and swirling. But the holiness was already there. Just like us, every atom in that water bowl is born of the birth and death of a million stars. Just like every atom of you, every quantum of energy that pulses and makes up what you are, was born of the birth and death of a million stars. We hold space to recognize the holy in each other. All deep truths are not true in that casual true or false way where there's an opposite. They're true in that deep paradoxical way. So we make things holy, but when we're honest, we don't get to take credit for it. We're recognizing the holiness that was always there, asking for our attention, inviting us to see it for its true self, inviting us to see one another for our true selves. We walk around sometimes with our armor on because life early on taught us that if we didn't armor up, we weren't going to be safe. Some of us have taken our armor off, but we're still covered in scar tissues, and that spiritual hip that got wounded in battle still hurts, and we got a bit of a limp. But what we need from each other is to be made holy by one another's attention. To give the gift of listening deeply when a friend or a colleague or a loved one needs to share. Showing up in that moment is giving the kind of attention that makes the relationship holy. Or shall we say it in the paradoxical way? It shows up and acknowledges the holiness trying to be born that was already and always there. Can we do that for one another? Can we hold space to listen quietly to each other's blessing as we pour through the water of this thing we call life? Can we invite each other into deeper stillness and deeper connection in a time that feels frantic and frenetic? Maybe after we march at the protest, we go and sit quietly in a park or on a porch together. And we're just there for each other, reminding us of the still and holy beauty for which the struggle is worth it. Reminding each other that these connections with one another, these moments of deep intimacy, are the things that the toxic folk crashing the planet are missing. And that we can model what that's like. We can model what it's like to be in harmonious communion with one another. Because you can't mask real joy, folks. And if you learn how to cultivate that joy of presence, that holiness making in your own life, you will be a beacon that says, there might be a less crazy way than this. So my invitation to you this morning is brief. We make things holy by the kind of attention we give them. I'm not asking you to be stingy with your attention. I'm asking you to be generous with it. Be generous with those you meet this week. Be generous with one another. Be generous in granting yourself the time to be and sit and heal and recover and rest before you charge back into those tasks in your life that just have to get done. Make some kind space for yourself. Remember that your moments here are holy things begging for your attention. We make things holy by the kind of attention we give them. Treat stones like plants. Treat plants like animals. Treat animals like humans. Treat strangers like friends. Treat friends like family. Treat family like your own self. And yourself as a sputtering flame of the divine, a bringer of greater life. Amen. Until next time, thank you for joining us on The Pulpiteer. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can help others find it by liking and subscribing. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can make a donation at sangabrieluu.org/give. The Pulpiteer Podcast is a production of the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Georgetown, Texas. The podcast is hosted by Spotify, and theme music is by John Faber. Our live recording tech crew this week was Frank Sanders, Rob Berthold, Keith Hutchinson, and Andrew McDaniel. The podcast is produced and performed by Eric Hepburn. See you next time.